During the crisis, the European Central Bank took many new roles, both within monetary policy and beyond, and we were asked by the European Parliament to write a paper ahead of the monetary dialogue with President Draghi and the European Parliament, and we wrote a paper with Silvia Merler in which we assessed these various roles and the possible synergies and conflicts of interest between these new tasks. Now, let me ask you, Silvia. Some people argue that there are conflicts of interest between bank supervision and monetary policy. What's your view on this?
Yes, of course, the provision of liquidity was massive, and this was very important also for keeping the euro area together during the crisis. In the future, it's actually the supervisory role that the ECB is taking on will help moderating the risk that these operations can raise moral hazard or incentivize risk-taking, excessive risk-taking on the side of the banks. And this can happen in two ways. So preemptively, the ECB is supposed to conduct a balance sheet assessment, called asset quality review actually, before taking supervisory competencies, and it should do it in a very tough way. So as to be able to know exactly what is the situation of banks and their health. And then after that, when it will have assumed supervisory competencies, then conducting supervision in a careful and tough way will be probably enough to make sure that these concerns are not a problem anymore.
So let's continue with financial supervision, which will be indeed the biggest change in the history of the European Central Bank. Now, some people argue that there are conflicts of interest between bank supervision and monetary policy.
So yes, there is indeed the biggest change that the ECB will go through, and there's been a lot of debate on whether supervisory competencies are compatible with monetary policy, and there are arguments pro and against the merging into one single institution, of course. The three main arguments that are usually raised against merging are the fact that supervisory competencies could make it more difficult for the ECB to stick to the price stability mandate, which in our view doesn't really seem to be a big problem because inflationary expectations are still very well anchored, and so this in the eyes of the market at least doesn't seem to be problematic. Then there is a point that is always often raised about risk of political captures, so the central bank possibly being captured by politicians or more political concerns that you should rather avoid taking into consideration. But we also think that maybe moving all the supervisors into one single institution could rather moderate instead of reinforce the problem of political capture. And then there is a reputational issue that is probably the most compelling argument that is being quoted against merging. And it would basically mean that mistakes or any negative events happening in the field of supervision, which can always happen despite how tough and how careful it's conducted, could reputationally damage the central bank as far as the price stability mandate is instead concerned. But we think it's not a problem to take, it's not really a problem as far as the ECB will conduct supervisory competencies in a very tough and careful way. So if this is the case, it shouldn't be a problem at all. And actually, there's a recent trend towards merging supervision and monetary policy. For example, the Bank of England has been reverting a previous separation and bringing together the supervisory competencies and the monetary policy into the Bank of England. So this seems to suggest that there are other central banks where this is considered to be the best option.
Another major role of the European Central Bank during the crisis has been that it participated in the troika along with the European Commission and the International Monetary Fund in designing and monitoring financial assistance programs. Now the question here is that does the ECB participation is justified, and if the ECB participates in such exercises, does it have a conflict with the primary mandate of monetary policy and price stability?
So this is probably the thorniest issue that we look at in the paper, because assessing the role of the ECB in the troika is very difficult. This role is rather ambiguous, and it is not really clear what exactly the ECB does and why it's there in the first place, nor how this role should evolve in the future. What is clear as a matter of fact is that this role is being made permanent, in a sense it's crystallized through the ESM treaty, which will give in the future to the ECB important competencies, important role to play in the design and monitoring and assessment of financial assistance. It raises a number of concerns related to both the ECB monetary policy conduct and the possible dilemmas that the ECB could face between financial stability and fiscal policy concern, which shouldn't be in the remit of the central bank. And the most important problem is perhaps related to the newest tool in the ECB toolkit, which is the outright monetary transaction, the OMT, which has proved to be very effective up to now. But that, if we look at it in the context of the ECB participation in the monitoring of financial system, raises important concerns.
Can we discuss this issue of the outright monetary transactions, or OMTs, in a bit more detail? Because indeed the European Central Bank launched this new program, which was very effective in calming down markets. The bond yields of Italy and Spain decreased very significantly. But as we know, there is some major objections against this program. For example, the German Constitutional Court is currently discussing the issue. And also there is a major problem whereby this is conditional on the countries fulfilling the conditions of the ESM-funded financial assistance programs. So what can happen if, for example, the country will not comply with the conditions of the financial assistance, but still, from monetary policy perspectives, the OMT would still be needed?
This is a very important question, and it's the most important issue in my view. And I think it is impossible to know ex ante, but the point is that the ECB will find itself in a very difficult position, because it will have to weigh, on one hand, the risk of terminating the program, and so possibly exposing the country to financial stability problems and the euro area as a whole to financial stability problems, and on the other hand continuing the program knowing that the conditionality is not respected, and of course this would present significant problems for the ECB credibility then in the future that conditionality will actually be enforced. So in a sense it's really difficult to see a solution for this problem, at least as the euro area architecture stands now, because on one hand bond buying programs are very challenging from a central bank's perspective, especially a central bank like the ECB, and so it makes sense that they are subject to conditionality, especially because previous experiences show that informal conditionality didn't work so well. But at the same time, the fact that it's the ECB charged of monitoring this fulfillment of this conditionality and evaluating and assessing the fulfillment of the conditionality, while at the same time being into the troika and part of the ESM framework, certainly raises some questions that are not very easy to answer.
So indeed it seems that some of the new roles of the ECB will be very beneficial for a better conduct of monetary policy. For example, financial supervision will likely support the monetary policy and vice versa. But on the other hand, the ECB's participation in the troika is very problematic, and it raises a number of questions, including the conditionality, assessment of conditionality in the financial assistance programs, which will be a major condition for the European Central Bank's outright monetary transactions.